episode of Relative Pitch. We are ecstatic, excited, thrilled to have Kedrick Armstrong with us today, just a conductor, amongst many other things.
Not the
Oh my
3-point
gosh,
tagline again.
Kedrick, oh my gosh, it is so amazing to have you with us today. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so much looking forward to this. This is going to be fun. I can tell already.
We were already cutting up before the camera turned on.
I love it.
Well, Kedrick, we know that you are, very known for your conducting, but just tell us a little bit more about what you do, who you are.
Yeah, so Kedrick Armstrong, I am from Georgetown, South Carolina, in the good old Low Country. I currently work, my title is creative partner and principal conductor of the Knox Galesburg Symphony in Galesburg, Illinois, which is what I do part-time. And then the rest of my time right now, I just kind of work as a freelance conductor and collaborator and cultivator, as my tagline says, and freelancing with a lot of different organizations, both in opera and in the orchestral field. And yeah, just being grateful for a life in music. I mean, that was the dream, and that's what we're doing. So
I love it because, sometimes I think, like, I don't think I really realized when I saw a conductor as, growing up, like, that they did other things. I just thought they were only here for this orchestra or this opera, this, symphony. And so talk to us a little bit about, really, for a conductor, like, you do have your principal position, but you're also doing all these other, people don't really, I guess, think about conductors as being freelancers in the same sense of, like, musicians being freelancers. Can you speak to the balance of that?
yeah, so I think for me, I just finished this past summer a master's degree at University of Colorado Boulder in orchestral conducting. And so this is sort of my like first time out into the wild as a freelance conductor. And it's really, it's a lot of contract-based work. And so for the orchestras that I worked with, it's usually like you're in for a week. You do 3 or 4 rehearsals, you do a show, and then you're like out of there. For opera companies, it's usually a little bit longer, depending on the length of the production, anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, you could be in a location kind of working on a show. And then, luckily I have, sort of a home base, that is both South Carolina, which is where I live right now, but also Galesburg, which is, an organization that I have the privilege of having a longer relationship with and being able to return multiple times and sort of having the ability to build my own programming and run auditions and do all of that stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of conductors who are like just getting started out before you're Gustavo Dudamel or Jonathan Hayward, you're sort of just building it. You're sort of kind of picking up the gigs as they come, and whoever will be brave enough to let you conduct their ensemble, you kind of say yes and don't look back.
Um, that's so interesting of just the world of conducting because you are in the orchestral track right now, and I'm in the wind band track, and it's like separate because the wind band is, I think more tied to the education side of things, and orchestral is more like the contracts. I'm here a week and I'm flying out. I might be across the waters in some foreign country, 2 weeks from now. So, what led you to choose going the orchestral route, and maybe explain to some listeners who, this could be a viable option for them, the road to how you got here?
Yeah, for me, choosing orchestral conducting was kind of just like natural. So I grew up, my first instrument was piano. I grew up as a church musician. I played, church piano by ear, Baptist church,
Yes.
backwoods of South Carolina. But I hated practicing piano. Like it was not like, I just wanted to show up and jam and like go home. Like that was my MO. And I chose clarinet. I was a clarinet player, and clarinet was what I, studied from middle school up until undergrad. And so that kind of naturally led me into the orchestral world. And I was always interested by the mass of instruments. Where I was growing up, we didn't have string programs in our schools. It was like you had a band, and our district had a string program. So I was lucky enough to be a part of that met on Saturday mornings, and learned cello and violin. And so by that point, I was like, oh, there's these string instruments and these wind instruments, and like people be putting them together. And like, by the time I got to be introduced to an orchestra, I was hooked. I was that group of musicians together, and how flexible it was. It's in R&B and rap music, it's in TV music, it's like in every facet of life the orchestra started to show up. And so that's kind of how I chose that lifestyle.
Wow. And then what were some of your routes, coming from South Carolina and now to, conducting across the country? What was that road like?
It was chaotic. I think we all, as musicians, and we're all, in school, and we know what these ladders are, and these sort of systematic ladders that are built in any career, in any field. These are the things that you do and the routes that you take in order to get somewhere. But as a Black, queer, Christian orchestra musician from South Carolina, like the ladder was always this mystery to me, because no one at the top of the ladder looked like me. So I was like, I don't really understand how this is going to work. I ended up going to a residential public high school called the South Carolina Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities, which is here in South Carolina. So when I was 15, I moved out and went to live with like these 200 other high schoolers who are artists. And that was like the time in my life where music as, classical music as an art form and career option really opened for me. And by that time, I knew I wanted to be a conductor, which was very young. Like I'd formed my first like chamber orchestra in high school, and we did these rehearsals, and I was arranging music. And so, for me, it was always music. And Governor's School led to me going to Wheaton College, which is where I did my undergrad in music history, because by that point I knew that I did not want to be a performance major. I had horrible and still have horrible performance anxiety. And so like the idea of playing in master classes and playing recitals was like, why would I like throw myself into the fire? Like, why would I do that? So for 4 years of that, after doing it so intensely in high school for 3 years, was unimaginable. But I was a nerd. I loved scores. I loved the research. I loved rehearsals. Like I would rather be in rehearsal all day than do a show. And so music history undergrad, I took 5 years off in between undergrad and did my, just finished grad school. And so, yeah, it was, kind of all over the place for me or choosing and becoming an orchestral conductor, but it was always making music in that way. That collaborative form of making music was always the goal.
Yeah. It's so funny. Just something quickly, because I resonated with this part of the performance anxiety of facing the audience versus not facing the audience. Because like me as a conductor, I love being in front of that. Now you put an instrument or you tell me to sing in front of these people, I'm not doing it. Like that's no, thank you. I will leave that to Lauren and Michael. They can be on the stage all they want to. But for me, my back will be to the audience. And I'm very comfortable, very comfortable.
Absolutely.
To go off of what Anthony was just saying, I love being in front of an ensemble next to the conductor. Like I'm literally about to go do it in 45 minutes. And it's just like one of my favorite things to do, because it's a different kind of collaboration. But you can ask Anthony, because I had my, let's call it first in conducting engagement this year. And Anthony, what did you hear the entire time while I was conducting?
What did I hear?
Remember
Oh, you're always blowing air. Like you're never done playing the trumpet.
everyone. I catch myself doing it all the time when I'm coaching sectionals and when I'm conducting. I'm like, well, I
Mm-hmm.
guess I can't do this no more. Just need to sit down and put a trumpet in my hand.
What's crazy
So
is like in like classes, like in undergrad, you know, Michael would be sitting there and he would be dissociating, God knows what, doing what, and you just hear, and it was so loud, and I'm like, Michael, shut up.
Well, not only in classes, he will do this at a symphony orchestra concert. Like
No,
we could be at your concert watching you conduct an orchestra, and if it's a song Michael know, Michael will be sitting there blowing air as if he's playing the trumpet. So loud. And like I don't know if he really realized like people can hear this. So you will see me and Lauren like hit him like shut up. Shut up.
but all the funniness leads to this. So what goes on in your head from taking the clarinet and having the performance anxiety to putting a stick in your hand, not facing the ensemble, and you find yourself at home? So how did that come about? Or is there still a little bit of performance anxiety you go through, but it's more comforting knowing you have like the team in front of you to do the thing?
Yeah, yeah, I will say, yeah, it's not like, clarinet is performance anxiety and conducting is not like, I'm the first to admit, like, I'm an anxious human being. Like I'm just going to be anxious.
Yep.
But for me, it's the collaboration that comes with being a conductor. I ever since the beginning, very quick story I'll tell. Like my first experience kind of leading a group of human beings in music was in fifth grade. I knew that our fifth grade class had to sing a song for our fifth grade commencement. And so I got my mom and we rewrote a Celine Dion song that I proceeded to teach the rest of the fifth graders during fifth grade music class. And I sat at the piano at our fifth grade commencement and led our class in the Celine Dion rewrite. So for me, it was always the collaboration of putting the thing together that I loved. I like, even when I was a clarinet player, like chamber music was my favorite thing to do as a clarinet player versus, solo or recital rep. And so for me as a conductor, like when I'm standing up there now, there's this level of trust that you just kind of have to have and that I love living into. Like I love being in conducting situations where I very much know like I'm not needed. Like they don't need me here. Like these are phenomenal musicians. Right. We've rehearsed, well, it's together. Like they can do this without me. And my job here is as an instigator, as a collaborator, as an agitator more so than the performance rests or hangs on my ability to blow air through my instrument. Like that to me is it's a very different psychological journey. And I think that speaks to the personality type of a lot of the conductors that I know. Like we tend to exist so much better at that, like be in the rehearsal room, put it together, at least like the good conductors, the same.
I knew something about that. I knew that line was gonna sneak its way in there somehow. And the way I said, and the tape was gonna be good conductors. And
and you're so right, because for me, I've always said like I always love a group setting. Like that was always my thing. I would say my favorite musical artist is Destiny's Child. Of course I'm a Beyonce stan, and I'm part of the Beehive. However, it is something about when those girls come together and create art. That to me, as at a young age, always made it like, oh my God, look what they're doing. And same thing being a conductor. It's about the collaborative efforts of everyone. of it's not just me, it's not just you, but we come together and we just make beautiful art. I think that's what's really most important. Now, for you as being, as you said, a Black queer conductor, how has that journey been for you to continue to create great art, but also realize your Blackness, your queerness in a field where it's not so celebrated as we would like it to be?
Yeah, I think that's like such an important question now, especially for me. And I'll be very honest, it was a journey. It was it was a journey, growing up in, like I said, in South Carolina without, really great representation, but also in an environment that very much painted classical music as like this as a white thing. It's white people music. And so growing up, even there was this tension of like, be a gospel musician, do what your people want, be a classical musician, do this other thing that your people really don't do.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, like it was kind of this assimilation game that so many of us have to play in order to survive these spaces. I knew that I wanted to be an orchestral conductor. I knew I wanted to conduct at, really high levels. And I had a lot of fear about being pigeonholed into only doing Black things if I were to ever become successful. And so I like dug hard into the canon, in those early years of my life. And when I said dug hard, I mean obsessed. Every Beethoven symphony, every Mahler symphony, every like all of the repertoire I knew and I could recite backwards, because I like wanted to be able to prove my worth in as a Black man in the field. And it wasn't until, I did a conducting fellowship with Chicago Sinfonietta that was really pivotal in my life, in that they were the first organization to really like take me by my neck and say like, you're a Black man on the podium and that's your power. Like that is what makes you special. That is what makes you unique. Like that is your voice. And to not live into that voice is not only a disservice to you, but a disservice to your audiences and to your ensemble and to the world. And so in 2019, 18, 20, like in those years, I had to do this entire overhaul of like my entire musical education, where I had never been really taught about Black composers or Black conductors. By the time I was in graduated college, I had never played, a piece by a Black composer in an orchestra. Like that was just like not something that was in my, worldview. And so I had to go back and dig. And that's kind of what led me to my master's degree, was, doing research specifically on Black musicians and Black artists and Black composers, and reclaiming that narrative for myself, for our field, and also, for our ancestors, so that I can come back home and be like, no, classical music is not a white people, like there are people of color like all over classical music for generations, and that has just not been taught. Like it's literally been, erased and hidden and gatekept and swept to the side for so long to create this narrative. And so I feel so much more responsibility in being proudly a Black queer conductor now than I did when I was younger. But I mean, that's life, that's growth, that's maturing, that's being an artist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That makes so much sense, because it's true, like especially when you were growing up, like, and wanting to be taken seriously, like what is a serious classical musician, you had to, especially as a conductor, the Mahlers, the Beethovens, like all of the, you absolutely must have, right? And I don't think what people talk about is that time frame where that pivotal point with Chicago Sinfonietta that you were talking about, of going, oh my gosh, this is the first space that I'm in, that my ensemble, in your instance, like is saying, hey, you're Black. Lean into that. Like lean
like
into
that part.
not like you're Black in the way that, it's like labeling and telling us what we should be and all those things that we often do face. But it's like there is power there and there is beauty there. And I love that you talked about it, because it's something that does happen. And I think the difference is like now, students who are growing up now don't, if they wanted to not go through that, if they wanted to immediately be like, I want to start off and I'm playing Black music specifically, or I'm playing music from my people's culture specifically, you could do that. There are avenues, there are professors at high conservatories, universities who will take those students in and they want them. They're actually seeking them out. And that is the difference, right? That is a huge difference.
Mind blowing. And I mean, like, that for me, it goes to show like what is possible. And I like, there's, I think every day as an artist, as a classical musician, as a human on this earth, like you go through this dichotomy of like, fighting for change, like being the change you want to see, and then also being confronted with just how, for lack of better words, like idiotic our field can be sometimes. But there are these moments where I think about, I just finished a master's degree where, I watch these kids, have these opportunities, and like there's funding now for like students performing music by Black composers, where like when I graduated in 2016, when I was in my undergrad, like this was not like, we weren't there. And so even to be able to see, just in that short amount of time, how far like we have come is very encouraging. But I'm always, with that same breath, like I just left a master's program. And so I'm like, I know what it's like, and I know what it can be like behind the performative, like, okay, so we did the pieces and we put your, William Grant Still is now taught in theory, and so bye-bye, like that's we did it. So I'm always like pushing for more because there is so much there.
Yeah. Well, especially, and I'm sorry, Anthony, especially like you're like, you love rehearsal, we all love rehearsal, we all love performances, but when you see these pieces like a William Grant Still, Florence Price, but then you see the rehearsal breakdown and you see which ones get the least amount of time. But then some miraculously, there's a cello concerto on there that gets almost as much time as like Dvorak 9. But why is my Florence Price, William Grant Still, Carlos Simon, why are they not getting my time? Why are we not digging into this repertoire like we should be? And that's where like the next, I think, next step of equality and all this other thing comes into play, is like equality of rehearsal time and equity of rehearsal time. And like, okay, I've been on gigs, and I know I'm new to this whole orchestra thing. I'm not an orchestra girly. That's not me. That's not my bag. But like, I remember doing a Pops gig for December, and then I was like, okay, are we gonna play this sleigh ride? They're like, oh no, we'll just perform it on the gig. I'm like, heard. Or Stars and Stripes I recently did. I'm like, okay, can we do this? Because I didn't practice my fingerings a little bit. And like, oh, we'll just do it on a gig. I was like, heard. So I'm like being in behind the scenes, knowing like, okay, we really just throw some of these pieces off and we actually work on these other pieces. I'm like, okay, so when is the equity and equality of rehearsal time and how much we dig into each piece gonna come into effect now that we've added the repertoire? When are we gonna respect the repertoire?
Mm-hmm. And actually, something that I've been noticing with that on like is exactly that is, symphony musicians, especially the ones who've been in the game for decades, have gotten used to a certain repertoire, and they know, right? They see it and they go, great, I don't really have to practice this, or I just have to dust off this one part. Now, though, that we're adding a new repertoire that maybe isn't new, but new to them, right? By more diverse composers. This is where there's a lot of tension that I've been seeing, like where it's like, well, we didn't like how it was, but it's like, well, you only rehearsed it for 20 minutes, but you rehearsed the Dvorak for like an hour. So do you realize that maybe if you would have actually spent more time in rehearsal, like private practicing on your own, that maybe you would have liked it more. Maybe the audience also would have liked it more if you would have played it correctly, And so that's what I hate the most, is when there's a disservice done to new works and to works by like composers who are outside of the traditional canon, and they're treated immediately like something different. They're othered immediately. Everyone's like, I don't like it. It's different. I have to actually practice to do this, which is a whole other problematic thing with the structure of symphony orchestras in this country specifically. But I have seen that. I have seen, and I wonder, like, for you as being the person on the podium, when you are working and you're doing rehearsals and you have to balance it with, like, we're doing the war horse, you know, all the war horses, you know, the things that everyone knows and loves. And then we have this new thing. How do you, I mean, what's your process like to really introduce that piece or pieces to your players for them to really actually engage in it and buy into it so it's a great experience for them, but also the audience?
Yeah, I think this is like such a responsibility on American conductors now, and something that's like grossly like not taught. It's like this is like the one of the biggest responsibilities of I feel like of American conductors across the board, but something that we just are expected to know when we write our diversity statement for our job applications. But this, I really try to believe this philosophy if I practice what I preach. Like if I am this person that is gung-ho about new music and about music from diverse composers, at every opportunity that I have, I'm a programmer. Like I'm in some situations now where like I'm guest conducting and people are asking for my programming, and it's like I'm gonna stand down. Like we gonna do what, like pick one of them. Like we gonna program something. Like I'm not doing this program that's just like all dead white guys. Like it's 2000. We are way beyond that. This shouldn't even be a conversation point now. And the fact that for some organizations, if I have to even bring it up, like I'm like, we need to reconsider like what you have on your website about diversity, equity, inclusion, because it shouldn't be this like, oh well, we did it in February and so we did it. Like, how do I make this a part of our everyday experience? And then for me, like you said, in rehearsals, I have to try to like figure out how to economically make that happen. I'm doing a program in a couple of months that's Shostakovich 5 and a new work by Carlos Simon. And like, it can be so easy for me and for a musician to be like, oh my God, Shostakovich 5, like, you gotta get this thing. They play this. They know this. And it's like, this is where I think like ego you cannot have an ego about being a conductor. It cannot be about you and your interpretation and your relationship with, like, it has to be about best serving the composers and the people in front of you. I know they know Shostakovich. I know the Carlos Simon is a new piece. I don't care how well I want the Shostakovich to go. I know that I have to give Carlos Simon's new work like a lot of time, and a lot of time being like uncomfortably more time than this organization would think that we should be spending on this piece for, like, but it's that's what's necessary, and that's the kind of space that I want to give living composers of color, because that's the experience that has been stolen for so many of them, for so many generations before. And so I like, it's really important to do that. And for me, I just model it. Like, I'm like, if I do it, like, usually when I'm asked for a rehearsal schedule, there's no musicians committee is like, I just put it out there, and I'm like, and I just have to live into it in the rehearsal. Like, it has to be a strategic and well-organized thing. And they have to trust that I have a reason for why I'm doing that.
Facts.
Yeah, something that you just said in the middle of your statement about the dichotomy of you send your program to some of these organizations that on their website has strong diversity statements, DEI statements.
Written by Grammarly.
But however, you being on like the flip side of that and kind of seeing the behind the scenes, you're getting a little pushback of like, well, we've already done our Black pieces already. Mm-hmm. What has that been like, seeing that and hearing that for places that specifically say, oh, we are DEI positive? But the question is, are you?
I think this goes back to something Lauren was saying earlier of just like, I mean, for lack of better words, and I really don't like this word, but for lack of better words, laziness, like just the laziness that is inherently a part of some of these systems, and the fact that people have been allowed to become lazy. usually when I met with that, and I mean, like, this has been from professional orchestras. I dealt with this, in collegiate settings of just like, even when they want to do pieces by Black composers, pieces by diverse composers, like, it's either, oh, we've already done that, we don't want to, do that anymore, or like, that's too hard, or like, no one really knows what that is. Like, we can't sell tickets with that, or like, it's too weird, it's too unfamiliar, because like, something that a huge part of my master's research was Black modernism and examining Black modernism in composers of the 20th century, and saying like, hey, there were Black composers out here who are Black composers, but they weren't writing influenced by jazz or influenced by the spiritual, like there's this diaspora of Black people writing classical music that ranges everything from William Grant Still, to Julia Perry, who sounds like, Hindemith or Stravinsky. Like, the gambit is wide. And a lot of that even comes from, like, they're comfortable with William Grant Still and Florence Price.
Yeah.
Like, that they will rock with. But if it gets a little too musically out there, if it has a little bit too, Julius Eastman, if it's a little bit too politically concerning, like, we just won't even mess with it. And I just try to push back. I just try to find ways to insert and find my audience. I am never going to push something down an organization's throat that they don't want to do, because that doesn't serve anybody. But what we are going to do is find something to program. We're not getting out of this. Like, there is as much breadth as there is in your community that you're trying to serve. There is that same breadth in diverse composers. So we can find something. We're gonna find something.
And that's like the same thing. I'm like trying to take a little, like, part of my artistic thing. I'm trying to take a little jab at is the, like, breaking down the walls of, like, composers like Stockhausen and those kind of composers. Like, I love that. I love it. I can, like, listen to it 2 hours and I'm here for it.
Oh my God.
I'm not lying. Yep.
You're not lying. That is exactly what his music sounds like.
Exactly. And I love it. I'm here for it. Like, we're gonna Millie rock to it later. But anyways, I'm trying to find new composers now that will take aspects of that, but break it down for, like, a middle school audience. So instead of doing like a 12-tone row, let's just do minor, and let's go into a little whole tone and back into minor, something they can be familiar with. Hey, this is sad. This is going to sound a little odd, and this is sad again. Like, breaking down this upper echelon, big quotations here, upper echelon high music, and breaking it down to middle schoolers and high schoolers that, no offense, I love band, first of all, love band, but we only play in flat keys. So our ear is not used to other keys and other modes. So, like, how can we break that down? So when they hit college, you can be like, hey, I want you to play this 12-tone row etude. Huh? And this kind of thing. So, like, and then in your point to it is like, hey, I know you're not going to play this music. This is the compromise we're going to play. But hey, here's these list of composers. That's not William Grant Still and Florence Price. That's also not Julius Eastman. And then bam, we're going to find somebody, because this stick ain't waving until we have some pieces that I want to conduct.
Well, also, what you brought up about Black artists specifically, I'm speaking about Black composers being put into a certain box of their music being either jazz influence or spiritual influence, as if that is the only Black experience of all of us, and that's just not true. So I'm very thankful that your research has went into that, and you're also programming music to represent that, contrary to popular white beliefs, no shade, that all Black people are not the same. We are not. That's a news flash, maybe to some that are listening, but that is true. We are not. And I will always remember Dr. William Lake said this to, I think it was either Kevin Day or Katash Copley, one of them. And he said, don't let these people put your music into a box. You can talk about Black Boy Joy. It doesn't always have to be about some, the Birmingham bombing in 1963 or the AME church in Charleston. It does not always have to be around strife and hard times. Black people have joy as well, and your music can reflect that too. And that really spoke to me. I'm not a composer. However, I am a conductor, and I think conducting, part of our job is being curators of almost like an art show. And so when I'm thinking of music, I don't want that to be the only experience, because our audience members are going to take that and say, well, this music is always going to be somewhere a variation of this. And that isn't true. So I'm just glad that when you doing your program, you take some of those other artists that have been overlooked through history and say, well, we're going to shed some light on that too.
Absolutely. One of my biggest things that has always been, part of my artistic sort of mantra is, the responsibility of both comforting and challenging an audience. Like, of art, like it's always been this both and this double-edged sword. And, in my own work of, trying to bring these voices to the music, I'm also like, I'm not just gonna do that. Like I like to tell people that my programming is like everything from Monteverdi to Montgomery. Like it's gonna be like what I like. And I'm gonna sit down at the harpsichord and jam out to some early music. I'm gonna conduct Stockhausen. I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna like, I love music, and as an artist, as a conductor, like all I want is for my audiences and my musicians is to love it as much as I love it. And that is our responsibility, to just put it out there and to do that justly and equitably and responsibly, and in a way that truly reflects and serves your community. And I truly believe if like all arts organizations like actually took that to heart and actually like, put that at the source of what they do, and like really looked at the community and really made everything they do a reflection of the people that they serve, like we would be in a much different place.
Mm-hmm. That was resounding, resonant, everything. And I'm just like immediately look at Lauren, because Lauren's loves community engagement, loves that kind of thing. And like I'm thinking about it like now sitting in an orchestra, and then also sitting just in music in general and fighting for our place in society still, our place in younger people's lives. And just like, why don't we really we have these resources. A lot of major orchestras have plenty of resources. Take a look at the communities you serve, the communities you don't get enough of in your halls, and find a way to reach them. And truly find a way to reach them. Not like, oh, okay, so if I'm going, like if we're in Georgia and I'm going to venture down below Atlanta, let me play this kind of music. Or if I'm going to venture above Atlanta, let me play this kind of music. But in Atlanta, I'm home, so I can play this kind of, no. Like you need to really look at your repertoire selection through the whole year and make sure there's something at every month, at least, that they can find a reason to come to. Like band directors can find a reason to bring their kids to your organization. I know at Chattanooga, we're doing this new series. It's not one of our masterworks yet, but it's pay what you can pay. Like you could pay $1.50 and come hear a concert that day. Or you could pay the normal ticket price. I'm like, okay, that's a way we can serve certain communities. So now let's start looking at the programming in which we do that one. Because if we can get them in the door with this thing, we can offer some other things down the road. We don't have to do a Gershwin Pops concert or a Frank Sinatra Pops concert, or, you know what I mean? Like the plethora of pops on top pops. Like we can do other music that engages every community around us, but we have to be smart about it. And we have to actually put forth the effort and thought-provoking things.
Put forth the effort. See, that's that a lot on that part.
Like what I see within, like, because that's exactly what I would do with the symphony, is I find ways to be out more in the community, to see what's going on, to meet with artists, to be, in different youth programs, and just seeing what's going on and what are the needs. Because another thing that I really hate is when organizations come into communities and tell them what they need and tell them what they should be, what they should enjoy, what they should desire. And my biggest question is always like, well, why should they want you in their community? Why should they want you here? Why should they take their money, their resources from their communities and put it into your organization? Like, that's, I always start with the why. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we engaging with these groups? And like, for me, especially being like a Black woman, I know that I have some, especially in certain spaces, people are, they want to be welcoming, and it's amazing for me. But then I also represent an organization that I'm like, I have to make sure that I'm doing my part to like not allow this organization that I am a part of to just come in just because their guards are down because they see me walk into the room and they're like, oh my gosh, it's Lauren. I'm like, it is Lauren, but let's make sure we get you set first, like before we, before I introduce any of this stuff, because that's the biggest thing about these kinds of roles, because they're popping up everywhere. There's community engagement coordinators, community relations managers popping up for all different organizations in the arts, finance, tech, everything. And there's a responsibility with that too, to be like, don't just play into what they want you to be. Like, I want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons and that it is actually helping the communities that I'm serving, because that's what I'm doing in this work, in this role that I'm doing. I want to serve the communities, and that's a huge. It's a lot of reflection that I have to do with every single partnership and opportunity that I have, every single conversation I have, to be like, okay, we did do this, but let me make sure I go back and say, hey, like, if you're not comfortable with this, or all these different things you have to think about. But also the idea of like, when you do get to go do performances in those communities, are they drastically different from what you're doing at your home venue? Because that is a huge thing that happens, is like, your community concerts don't look anything like your actual, like, subscription Masterworks series. And that says something, whether or not you think it does or not. That says something to not only the musicians, but the community. When you say, this is a free concert, this is one you pay for, So I don't know. It's a lot I've been learning and noticing, and things that I really try to bring into the perspective, which is another thing that I do, is like, I take the perspectives that I learn from out there and I bring it back in and saying, this is how you're being perceived. Change it. Change it or die. Like,
and there it is.
It's just the truth. And like, I mean, for me, I'm so grateful to have you and so many other amazing like artists who are out in the community doing the work now, because it's about the representation of who you are, but also you are intentionally doing this kind of work. You're intentionally bringing about this kind of change that you want to see. You're reflecting all the time. You're shifting, you're changing, we're growing, we're evolving, and you're taking that with you everywhere you go. And that's inspirational. And I hope that if there are people listening to this who maybe you feel the same way, you're like, I was on this track and now I'm realizing that I didn't have a lot of, like, I didn't put a lot of my identity into what I was doing, and like, make this the moment where you go, I can do it. Like, take a moment to really realize it is possible. We're seeing it, right? We want to keep pushing it forward, but like, at the same time, like, you can do it now. It can start with something very small, and then it can change over time. So, Kedrick, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge with us. I mean, I already knew this was going to be a hoot, but like, I didn't, like, it just, thank you, truly.
Thank you all so much for having me, and I mean, for giving space for us that are out here in the world trying to do the work. I mean, this has been healing. I very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, what's happening next? Where can we find you? What are your next engagements?
I am traveling back to Galesburg next. We have our Christmas Baroque concert that we're doing at the beginning of December. And then I'm heading to Atlanta to workshop in opera at the Atlanta Opera for a couple of days. And then Chicago at the beginning of the new year. So you can find out all of that and everything else on my website, KedrickArmstrong.com. I think that's what it is.
Well, everyone make sure to go check out Kedrick's website and try to find him if he pops up into your city sometime soon. And we'll see you next week on Relative Pitch. Bye, everyone.
See you later.